The message from my father arrived while I was in the middle of coaching 20 teenagers through their first competitive gaming tournament. My phone buzzed with his text. Family announcement this weekend. Your presence is required. My name is Avery, and that single message managed to derail my entire week. I hadn't been home in months. Not since the last disastrous family dinner where my stepmother Karen had spent the entire evening showcasing my half-sister Claire's latest achievements while pointedly ignoring mine. Miss Collins. One of my students waved frantically from their gaming station. The server's acting weird again. I pocketed my phone, pushing aside the knot forming in my stomach. Coming, Tommy. And remember, in tournament play, we troubleshoot first, panic second. The rest of the day passed in a blur of technical issues and coaching sessions. By closing time, my phone had 3 missed calls from my father and another text. This is important, Avery. Don't skip out like last time. That night, I sat cross-legged on my couch, staring at my phone while my fiancé Ethan cooked dinner in our small kitchen. You're doing that thing again, he said, stirring something that smelled amazing. The one where you overthink everything until your brain explodes. I don't overthink, I muttered, then caught his knowing look. Okay, fine. But Dad never demands family meetings. Something's up. Maybe Claire finally learned how to tie her shoes without help, Ethan joked, then sobered when I didn't laugh. Sorry. Low blow. I sighed, remembering the last time I'd seen my younger half-sister. Claire had spent the entire evening making subtle digs about my little gaming club, and how it must be so fulfilling to play with other people's children since you can't have any of your own. That particular barb still stung. I should go, I said finally. If only to stop Dad from sending the National Guard after me. The drive to my childhood home that weekend felt longer than usual. Each mile marker brought back memories of growing up there after my mom died, of my grandmother Helen raising me while Dad was deployed, Claire's arrival when I was 12, and her mother Karen's immediate campaign to remake our family in her image. I pulled into the circular driveway, noting Claire's shiny new Mercedes parked in my usual spot. Of course. Dad opened the door before I could knock. You're late. Hello to you too, I said, accepting his awkward hug. He smelled the same as always, Old Spice and coffee. Some things never changed. The living room was exactly as I remembered, down to the family photos on the wall. I noticed with a twinge that Grandmother Helen's portrait had been moved to a less prominent spot. Claire sat in Helen's old armchair like she owned it, Karen perched on the armrest beside her. They both wore matching expressions of barely concealed satisfaction that made my skin crawl. Now that we're all here, Dad cleared his throat, Claire has some news. My sister's hand drifted to her stomach in a gesture that made my heart sink before she even opened her mouth. I'm pregnant, Claire announced, her smile sharp as a knife. You're going to be an aunt, Avery. Isn't that wonderful? Now you'll finally get to experience what it's like to have a baby in the family, even if it's not quite the same as having your own. The room went silent. I felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to form but forced them back. Claire's words hung in the air like poison, perfectly crafted to hit where it hurt most. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We thought you should hear it in person. Family first, right? I managed a tight smile, even as my fingers curled into fists at my sides. Congratulations, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. If you'll excuse me, I need some air. As I walked out onto the porch, I heard Karen's voice drift through the open window. She's always been dramatic. Don't let her ruin your moment, sweetheart. I leaned against the railing, letting the cool evening air clear my head. Something in me had shifted, hardened. This wasn't just about the baby announcement. This was about years of subtle cruelty, of calculated jabs and manufactured competitions. My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. You okay? I wasn't. But I would be. 'Cause for the first time in my life, I was done playing nice. I didn't expect Dad to follow me onto the porch, but there he was, closing the screen door behind him with that familiar, careful quietness, the same way he used to check on me after Mom died. Your grandmother used to stand right there, he said, gesturing to where I was leaning against the railing. Watching storms roll in. I remember. I didn't add that I also remembered how Helen was the only one who stood up to Karen when she tried to redecorate the entire house, claiming the porch furniture was too country. The wicker chairs were still here, a small victory in a war of attrition. Karen's organizing a baby shower next month, Dad said, his voice carefully neutral. She wants to do it here. Of course she did. The same house where Helen had raised me, where I'd spent countless hours reading in the window seat that Karen had later converted into a display case for Claire's cheerleading trophies. You don't have to come, he added quickly. Don't I? I turned to face him. Won't it look bad if the aunt doesn't show up? Won't Karen have something to say about that? He flinched. Avery. The screen door creaked open and Claire waddled out, one hand on her barely visible bump. Daddy, Mom wants to know if you'll grab more wine from the cellar. The good stuff, not the cheap bottles Avery brought last time. I hadn't brought any wine last time. Claire knew that. Sure, princess. Dad disappeared inside, leaving us alone. Claire's sweet smile dropped the instant he was gone. You know, you could at least pretend to be happy for me. I am happy for you, I lied. Thrilled, even. Really? Because you stormed out pretty quickly after my announcement. I needed air. You needed attention, she corrected, moving closer. Just like always. Poor infertile Avery. Can't stand someone else being the center of attention for once. My nails dug into my palms. Is that what you think this is about? I think it's about what everything's always been about with you. Jealousy. She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. You're jealous that I can have what you can't. That I'm giving Dad his first grandchild. That Mom loves me more than. Karen isn't my mother, I cut in. And Helen left me the house. Claire's face went white. What? I hadn't meant to say it. The paperwork had arrived last week, Helen's final gift, held in trust until my 28th birthday. I'd been waiting for the right time to tell everyone, but Claire's smug superiority had cracked something in me. The house is mine, I said, the words tasting like victory. Grandmother Helen left it to me in her will. I get full ownership next month. Claire's hands trembled. You're lying. Ask Dad. He's known for years. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. So, maybe you should rethink having your baby shower here. Wouldn't want to impose. The screen door slammed open. Karen stood there, her face twisted with rage. I heard everything, she hissed. How dare you? How dare I what? Inherit my grandmother's house? Claire is pregnant. This is her moment, and you're trying to ruin it with your spiteful little power play. Karen. Dad appeared behind her, holding a wine bottle. What's going on? Your daughter is trying to kick us out of our home. That's not what I said, I protested, but Claire was already crying, her hands protectively covering her stomach. The stress isn't good for the baby, she sobbed. She's trying to hurt my baby. Dad looked between us, lost. Avery, maybe we should discuss this another time. Of course, I said quietly. Take care of your pregnant daughter. It's what you do best. I walked to my car, ignoring Karen's continued accusations and Dad's weak attempts to call me back. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Claire in my rearview mirror. She wasn't crying anymore. Instead, she was watching me leave with the same calculating expression she'd worn when she'd announced her pregnancy. This wasn't over. We both knew it. But for the first time, I had something she wanted. And I intended to use it. The message that broke me came from Sarah, my oldest student's mother, 3 days after the family dinner. She wanted to discuss some concerns about my mentorship program. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop, expecting questions about tournament schedules or equipment fees. I was wrong. I heard some disturbing things, Sarah said, stirring her untouched latte. About your situation. My stomach dropped. My situation? Your sister Claire reached out to several parents. She mentioned your condition might affect your ability to relate to children properly. Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. She suggested we might want to consider other programs. The coffee shop's ambient chatter faded to white noise. Claire hadn't just attacked me personally, she'd gone after my business, my students, everything I'd built. My infertility has nothing to do with my ability to teach, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Tommy's tournament rankings have improved by 30% since he started with us. I know, but what? Claire's pregnant, so suddenly she's an expert on children? Sarah shifted uncomfortably. She mentioned she's starting her own youth program. Something more traditional, less competitive. Of course she was. Claire had never shown any interest in gaming or coaching before, but now that she knew it mattered to me, I stood up, nearly knocking over my chair. Excuse me. I need to make a call. Sighed, I pressed my forehead against the cool brick wall and dialed Claire's number. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. Hello, sister dear. How are you coping with the house news? Cut the act, I snapped. I know what you're doing. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm just looking out for children's best interests. After all, what would our grandmother think about you using her house to run a business teaching kids to waste their lives playing games? Don't you dare bring Helen into this. Why not? She's the reason you think you're better than everyone else. Perfect Avery, Helen's favorite, too good for family now that she has her precious inheritance. Is that what this is about? You're sabotaging my business because you're jealous of a house? Claire's laugh was bitter. I'm protecting vulnerable children from someone who can't possibly understand what it means to be a mother. You should thank me, really. Now you won't have to pretend anymore. I ended the call before I could say something I'd regret. My phone immediately buzzed with a text from Claire. By the way, I've already got 5 of your students' parents interested in my new program. Funny how quickly they change their minds when they learn the truth about you. I slumped against the wall, fighting back tears. Years of work, of building trust with these families, and Claire was destroying it all with a few well-placed words. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. Hey, you okay? Your afternoon class is starting soon. Class? I'd almost forgotten. I had 6 teenagers waiting to learn advanced strategy techniques, kids who trusted me, who'd improved under my guidance despite my condition. I straightened up, wiping my eyes. Claire wanted to play dirty? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important. I'd learned strategy from the best. And Helen hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me her entire gaming collection, including journals full of tournament notes dating back decades. I texted Ethan back. I'm good. Actually, I have an idea. Remember that charity tournament we talked about? The one you said was too ambitious? Things change. How fast can you set up a live stream event? And can you get your developer friends involved? Give me 48 hours. What are you planning? I smiled, thinking of Claire's smug face when she thought she'd won. Teaching my sister a lesson about games. And family. And why you should never underestimate someone just because they can't have children. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in days. Claire thought she could use my infertility against me. She was about to learn that some battles aren't won by having the right biology, they're won by having the right strategy. And I'd been strategizing my whole life. I found the adoption pamphlets while cleaning up after dinner. Ethan had hidden them under a stack of gaming magazines, but they spilled across the kitchen counter when I moved them, glossy pages full of smiling families and promises of new beginnings. I was going to bring it up differently, Ethan said from the doorway, making me jump. Maybe over wine. Or after the charity tournament. My fingers traced the edge of a pamphlet. How long have you been thinking about this? Since before Claire's announcement. He moved closer, careful, like I might bolt. I know the timing seems reactive, but what? You thought now would be perfect? While my sister is actively trying to destroy everything I've built because she thinks I'm unfit to be around children? That's exactly why we should consider it. Ethan picked up one of the pamphlets. To prove her wrong. To show everyone that family isn't about biology or pregnancy announcements. It's about love and choice. My phone buzzed, another parent withdrawing from the program. Third one this week. Claire would use it against us, I said quietly. She'd say we're only doing it to compete with her pregnancy. To steal her spotlight. Since when do you care what Claire thinks? Since she started poisoning my entire life. The words burst out louder than intended. She's turning everyone against me, Ethan. Parents, Dad, even my own students are starting to doubt me. And now you want to add adoption scrutiny to that mix? I want to build a future with you, he said. One that isn't defined by what Claire does or doesn't do. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Dad. Claire's having complications. Doctor ordered bed rest. She's staying at the house. Thought you should know. Of course she was staying at the house. My house. The one Helen left to me. She's moving in, I said, showing Ethan the message. She's actually moving into the house before I can even claim it. Can she do that? Dad's still technically the executor until my birthday next month. He can let anyone stay there he wants. I laughed, the sound hollow. Want to bet she'll have redecorated my old room for the nursery before I get the keys? Ethan was quiet for a moment then. Maybe we should move. What? After the tournament. After you get the house. We could sell it, move somewhere Claire can't reach us. Start fresh, maybe look into adoption agencies in another state. Run away, you mean? I stared at the pamphlets, at all those perfect families smiling up at me. Let Claire win. Let her have an empty victory while we build something real. Another text from Dad. Karen's organizing a baby shower here next week. Claire really wants you there. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I picked up one of the adoption pamphlets, really looking at it this time. A young couple played with their adopted daughter, their faces bright with genuine joy. No forced smiles, no calculated performances. Just family. Helen always said the house was meant to be a home, I said slowly. Not a weapon. What are you thinking? I reached for my laptop. I'm thinking it's time to change the game. Claire wants to play happy families? Fine. But first, we're going to show everyone what real family support looks like. I pulled up the charity tournament plans we'd been working on. What if we made it bigger? Not just gaming, a full community event. Supporting local adoption agencies, foster care programs. Using Claire's tactics against her? No. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Using my grandmother's strategy. She always said the best way to win isn't to tear others down, it's to build something so beautiful they can't ignore it. Ethan grinned. I love it when you get that look. What's the first move? I picked up my phone, ignoring Dad's text to compose a different message. This one to all my remaining students' parents. Invitation to a special announcement. Time to show you what our program is really about. Claire wanted war? I'd give her something better, hope. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find some for myself along the way. The lawyer's office felt too small for the 5 of us. Dad sat between Claire and me while Karen hovered protectively behind Claire's chair. The inheritance paperwork lay unopened on Mr. Peterson's desk, but that wasn't why we were here. Let me understand this correctly, Mr. Peterson said, adjusting his glasses. Miss Collins, you're requesting an early transfer of property ownership due to unauthorized renovations. I placed my phone on his desk, playing the video Tommy's mom had sent me yesterday. The footage showed Karen directing workers at the house, supervising as they carried Helen's antique furniture out to a waiting truck. They're gutting my grandmother's home, I said. Without permission. We're preparing the nursery, Karen cut in. Richard approved it. Dad shifted uncomfortably. I didn't realize they were removing Helen's things. Of course you didn't. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. You never notice anything when it comes to Claire. Claire's hand moved protectively over her bump. The doctor said stress isn't good for the baby. And that old furniture was full of dust, and that furniture was my inheritance. My voice cracked. Everything in that house meant something. Every piece had a story. Stories don't matter to a baby, Claire said softly, her eyes gleaming with false concern. But I understand why you're so attached. It must be hard knowing you'll never have a real family to pass these things down to. The room went silent. Even Karen looked shocked at Claire's cruelty. Miss Collins, Mr. Peterson cleared his throat, legally speaking, until your 28th birthday next month, your father retains executor rights. However, given the circumstances... My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. Local news picked up the charity tournament story. They want to interview you about combining gaming with adoption awareness. Something clicked in my mind. I'd like to make a proposal, I said, sitting straighter. Dad, you want peace in the family. Claire, you want the nursery. Fine. Keep the house for now. Claire's triumphant smile lasted exactly 3 seconds. But I'm hosting my charity tournament there next week. A full media event highlighting local adoption services and foster care programs. After all, I met Claire's eyes. It's still legally Dad's house, and he always taught us about giving back to the community. Right, Dad? Dad's military posture returned, the way it always did when he was cornered. That seems reasonable. You can't be serious, Karen sputtered. Claire needs rest, not some noisy gaming circus. The event will be in the backyard, I said. Claire can rest upstairs. Unless there's some reason you don't want the community seeing inside the house. Claire's face went pale. She knew exactly what I was implying. If they refused, people would question why. Especially after Claire had spent weeks spreading rumors about my fitness to work with children. I think it's a wonderful idea, Mr. Peterson said, clearly enjoying the drama. Very much in keeping with Helen's philanthropic spirit. Fine, Claire snapped. Have your little event. But don't think this changes anything. That house will never be yours in the way that really matters. You'll never fill it with family the way I will. I stood up, gathering my things. You know what, Claire? You're right. I won't fill it with family, because family isn't about filling spaces. It's about building connections. Something Grandmother Helen tried to teach us, though clearly only one of us was listening. As I reached the door, Dad called out, Avery, wait! The event team will be there Monday to set up, I said without turning around. Try not to remove any more of Helen's memories before then. Outside, my hand shook as I texted Ethan. It's done. Plan B is go. His reply was immediate. You sure about this? Once we start, I looked back at the lawyer's office, where Claire was already playing the victim for Dad again. She thought she'd won by taking Helen's house. She had no idea that some victories came disguised as losses. I'm sure, I typed. Time to show everyone what real family looks like. And this time I had more than just games up my sleeve. I had truth. The charity tournament was supposed to be my moment of triumph. Instead, I stood frozen in Helen's backyard, now barely recognizable under Karen's garden party decorations, watching Claire steal even this from me. As someone who truly understands the importance of nurturing children, Claire was saying to the local news reporter, one hand resting on her visible bump, I'm excited to announce my own youth mentorship program, one that focuses on traditional values and real family connections. The camera panned to capture the crowd's approving nods. Several of my former students' parents stood among them, including Sarah, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. Of course, Claire continued, her voice dripping with false concern. We'll welcome all children, even those from alternative family structures. After all, Everyone deserves guidance from someone who understands traditional family values. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing tight. We can still shut this down. It's your event, your grandmother's property. Actually, Karen stepped forward, brandishing a paper. We have something to share about that. She smiled at the reporter. Richard, dear, would you like to make the announcement? Dad emerged from the crowd, looking uncomfortable but determined. Given Claire's condition and her new community program, we've decided to transfer ownership of the house to her permanently. The paperwork was filed this morning. The world tilted sideways. You can't, I whispered, but the microphones picked it up. The inheritance was contingent on several factors, Karen cut in smoothly, including the property's continued use for family purposes. Richard and I agree that Claire's program better serves that intention. Claire's triumphant smile felt like a knife. We're keeping Helen's legacy alive the way she would have wanted, by nurturing future generations. Not through video games. I spotted Helen's chest set through the window, still sitting in its familiar spot. The one thing they hadn't packed away yet. My vision blurred. You want to talk about Helen's legacy? My voice shook. Let's talk about what she really wanted. Let's talk about the letter she left. Commotion near the house cut me off. Tommy, my youngest student, had slipped inside and was now running back out, Helen's chest set clutched in his arms. Miss Collins! I saved it before they could. He tripped. The antique chess set flew from his hands in slow motion. Pieces scattered across the patio like broken dreams. The hand-carved board splitting with a crack that felt like Helen's heart breaking all over again. This is exactly why children need proper supervision, Claire announced to the crowd. From people who understand. Shut up. The words came out raw. Just shut up, Claire. You didn't even know her. You spent every holiday at your mom's parents' house. You never sat with Helen, never learned her stories, never. But I'm giving her what she always wanted, Claire interrupted. A real family in her home. Children. A future. What can you offer except broken games and empty rooms? Cameras were still rolling. My students watched with wide eyes. Everything I'd built, everything I'd planned, lay shattered like the chess pieces at my feet. I think we're done here, Karen announced, moving to usher the reporters toward Claire. We'll have a proper press release about the new program tomorrow. Dad stepped toward me, conflict written across his face. Avery, don't. I backed away, nearly tripping over the chess pieces. Just don't. I turned and ran, ignoring Ethan's calls, ignoring the murmurs from the crowd. Behind me, I heard Claire's voice rise again, as I was saying about traditional family values. My car wouldn't start. Of course it wouldn't. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel, finally letting the tears fall. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I opened it, expecting more disaster. Instead, I found a photo, Helen's desk drawer, partially open, revealing a sealed envelope with my name on it. Below the photo was a message. Found this while they were packing up. Thought you should know. The moving guy. Through my tears, I smiled. Maybe Helen had one last move to play after all. Breaking into my own inheritance wasn't exactly how I'd planned to spend the evening, but here I was, picking the lock to Helen's study while Ethan kept watch. The moving truck wouldn't arrive until morning. This was my last chance. Someone's coming, Ethan whispered. I finally felt the lock click. 2 minutes. That's all I need. Claire's voice drifted up the stairs. I just need to grab something from the study. The decorator wants to see. The door opened before I could hide. Claire stood there, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the doorframe. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I knew it, she said, her voice rising. Mom! Dad! Avery's trying to steal. The letter. I held up my phone, showing her the photo. That's all I want. The one in Helen's desk. There is no letter. But her eyes darted to the drawer. Karen's footsteps thundered up the stairs. I lunged for the desk, yanking the drawer open as Claire screamed, "She's attacking me!" The envelope was there, just as the photo showed. I grabbed it just as Karen burst in, Dad right behind her. "She pushed me." Claire stumbled backward dramatically, but her heel caught the antique rug. This time, her fall wasn't staged. She went down hard, crying out in genuine pain. "Claire!" Karen rushed to her side while Dad blocked the doorway, his face a storm of confusion and anger. "I never touched her," I said, backing away. "Check the security cameras." Helen had them installed everywhere, remember? To protect her antiques. Claire's face went white. "The cameras are working perfectly," Ethan cut in, holding up his phone. "I'm a developer, remember? Accessing their feed was pretty easy. Especially since Avery still had Helen's passwords." "Show me," Dad demanded. Ethan pulled up the footage. We watched in silence as it showed me entering the study, Claire following, and her deliberate stumble, followed by the real fall that no one had caused. "You've been recording us?" Karen's voice shook with rage. "Invading our privacy?" "No," I said, opening Helen's letter. "I've been protecting her legacy. The way she taught me." The letter was short but devastating. Helen had known about Claire and Karen's manipulations. She'd left the house to me with specific conditions, including one that said if anyone tried to contest the inheritance through legal means, everything would be donated to a children's charity instead. "You can't prove when that was written," Karen snapped. "We'll challenge it." "Check the metadata on the security footage," Ethan said quietly. Helen recorded herself writing and sealing this letter 3 days before she died. She knew exactly what would happen. Claire struggled to sit up, her face twisted with pain and fury. "This doesn't change anything. I'm still giving Dad what you never could, a real family, a grandchild, a future." "Claire," Dad's voice cracked. "Stop." We all turned to him. He looked older suddenly, defeated. "I watched the footage," he said. "All of it. The way you've been treating your sister, the things you've said about her students, her business." He shook his head. "Helen was right. I've been blind." "Richard," Karen started, but he held up his hand. "The house stays with Avery, as Helen wanted. And Claire." He finally met my eyes. "You owe your sister an apology." Claire's laugh was bitter. "For what? For wanting what's rightfully mine? For trying to build something real instead of playing games?" "That's exactly what Helen was afraid of," I said, reading from the letter. "Family isn't about ownership or control. It's about nurturing growth, supporting dreams, and understanding that love multiplies. It doesn't divide." I folded the letter carefully. "Keep the furniture you moved. Keep the renovations. But the house is mine. And I know exactly what I'm going to do with it." "What's that?" Claire spat. I smiled, thinking of the adoption pamphlets waiting at home. "I'm going to fill it with family. Just not the kind you understand." As I walked out, I heard Dad following. Maybe some bridges weren't completely burned after all. But first, I had a real legacy to build. 6 months later, I stood in Helen's study, my study now, watching the sunset paint the walls gold. The room still held her presence, though I'd made some changes. Her chess set, carefully restored, sat beside my gaming equipment. Old and new, just like she would have wanted. The sound of children laughing drifted up from the backyard. My advanced gaming class was having their graduation ceremony, complete with proud parents and a local news crew. This time, the coverage was about our program's success, not family drama. "Miss Collins." Tommy poked his head in. "They're ready for the presentation." "Thanks, buddy. I'll be right down." He hesitated. "Is it true? About you and Mr. Brooks adopting?" "News travels fast," I smiled. "We're just starting the process. It's going to take time." "Cool." He grinned. You're already pretty good at the mom stuff anyway. As he bounded away, I caught my reflection in Helen's old mirror. I looked different somehow, stronger maybe. More like her than ever. Dad was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. We'd been rebuilding slowly, coffee dates and careful conversations. Today was the first time he'd visited the house since everything happened. Karen left, he said quietly, after Claire's baby shower last week. Said she couldn't handle the shame of. He trailed off. The video going public? The security footage had leaked somehow, not through Ethan or me, showing Claire's manipulations and lies. Her traditional values program had collapsed overnight. Dad nodded. Claire's staying with her aunt in Colorado. Says she needs space to find herself before the baby comes. He met my eyes. She asked about you. Did she? Wanted to know if you'd really turn the house into some kind of gaming orphanage, her words. I laughed. Just a regular gaming academy. Though we do offer scholarships now, thanks to Helen's foundation. Through the window, I could see Ethan setting up the presentation screen, my students helping him arrange chairs. Sarah, who'd returned with a heartfelt apology after the truth came out, was organizing refreshments. Helen would be proud, Dad said. Not just of this, but of how you handled everything. You didn't let anger win. No, I agreed. I let love win. The way she taught me. We walked outside together. The evening air was warm, carrying the scent of Helen's roses, the one part of the garden I hadn't changed. As my students gathered for the ceremony, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the gate. Claire. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. When our eyes met, she didn't smile or wave. She just watched, one hand resting on her bump, as I awarded certificates and praised each student's achievements. As I announced our new adoption support initiative, partnering with local agencies to help families navigate the system. When the ceremony ended, I expected her to leave. Instead, she walked to Helen's rose garden, touching a bloom gently. She taught me about these once, Claire said as I approached. I pretended not to care, but I remembered everything she said. Why are you here? I don't know. She looked lost. Maybe to see what real legacy looks like. We stood in silence, the roses swaying between us like memories. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said finally. But my baby. Your niece. I don't want her growing up thinking family is about winning and losing. It's not, I said. It's about growing. Sometimes together, sometimes apart. She nodded once, then turned to leave. The roses look good, she said softly. You take care of them like she did. I watched her go, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. We were both Helen's roses, grown in different gardens. Later, as Ethan and I cleaned up, he asked, You okay? I looked around at my home, at the gaming equipment and chess sets, at the adoption paperwork on my desk, at Helen's roses blooming in the twilight, at all the different ways love could grow. Yeah, I said. I'm exactly where I need to be. Family, I'd learned, wasn't about blood or birthright. It was about choosing to nurture what matters, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Just like Helen always said.
On June 18 at 1:00 p.m., I will also be getting married. Whoa, that's USIS Day 2. Jenny, my sister, gave me a scornful sneer. The day and even the start time coincide with my wedding. What is happening? I see. So your wedding is only for relatives, right? Less than 100 people, so depressing. All of our friends, family, and coworkers are invited. It will be a lavish event. I wanted to say, do anything you want, but I refrained and said something different. I'm a 30-year-old office worker named Katie. Sam and I recently had our marriage officially registered. Sam is 3 years my senior. We convened for our usual coffee. We struck up a conversation as we kept running into each other there, and discovered that we both like to read. We made the decision to get married after 2 years of dating. Sam, my husband, is a devout and kind man who works for a firm that deals with food. A month from now is our wedding. Now that the big day is almost here, all that remains is the preparations. Well, several of my pals are getting married in big, extravagant ways to lots of people. We chose to have a modest ceremony attended just by our relatives. This is because I don't want to expose my friends and coworkers to Jenny and my parents. My parents have always favored my sister Jenny above me ever since I was a child. Jenny and I are 3 years apart in age. Jenny has a really attractive face, even in my opinion as her elder sister. She has long eyelashes and large, sparkling eyes. She has a petite face and fair, transparent skin, giving her the appearance of a fashion model. She's really been scouted by talent agencies on several occasions, and she even did some modeling when she was a student, so she's kind of a local star. She brought pride and delight to my parents. Why does Katie have such a plain face when Jenny is so cute? This is the kind of stuff my mother used to say about my appearance. My father used to remark things like, "Looking at Katie's plain face just dampens my mood every day." My parents used to criticize me and compare us sisters. Furthermore, they would only lavishly celebrate Jenny's birthday or take her out on the weekends. They were always favoring her above me in their day-to-day dealings. Jenny knew she was the favorite child of our parents. She started to look down on me as a result. In the same way, our parents were forgiving of Jenny, but harsh with me. For instance, why can you only get such mediocre scores? With reference to test results, my parents used to chastise me like way when I had mediocre grades. On the other hand, they would kindly tell Jenny, "You can do better next time," when she received poor marks. My parents' perspective on Jenny and me would totally shift in this way on everything. Katie and Jenny are sisters, but they don't look alike at all. My father would frequently remark, "I never intended to become a mother to Katie." It was not unusual to hear such critical remarks every day. It wasn't a family I wanted to be born into either. I used to talk back to my parents in my heart if they treated me poorly. Because she was given extra attention by our parents, Jenny grew up to be a self-centered, diva-like person. Her personality is the worst, despite her gorgeous features. "Sis, you don't resemble me at all." Jenny would say things like, "I'm so glad I don't resemble you with your shabby face," on purpose to make fun of me. I didn't want to introduce my family to Sam or his parents, since that's how my family operates. Even though I didn't go into much depth, Sam and his parents appeared to understand the issue. When I stated, "I want a small, intimate wedding," they accommodated my request. On the other hand, my parents suggested, "At least let us greet them," after our marriage was finalized. They insisted that the two families get together. Even though it made me uncomfortable, I had to set up a meeting between the two families. Jenny and my parents arrived on my side of the meeting day. Sam's parents joined in as well, and we all shared a dinner. I was unable to unwind because I was afraid my sister or parents might say something odd. This prevented me from savoring the opulent dinner. Despite the fact that this meeting was intended to prepare for our marriage, my parents had little interest in Sam. They would just hum to indicate the end of our conversations, regardless of our attempts to discuss how we met or our future plans after marriage. But when it came time to present Jenny, my parents leaned forward and spoke without stopping. All they could do was praise Jenny in front of Sam's parents. Sam's parents would quickly shift the topic back to Jenny, even when they made a nice attempt to redirect the subject towards me. But more importantly, this is how our Jenny looks. Jenny exclaimed with joy, "Oh, Mom and Dad, you're praising me too much," as she was thrilled to be complimented in front of others. I know there's not much to discuss about Katie, but After my parents and Jenny had improper conversations, Sam's parents, who had earlier been grinning, were now wearing uncomfortable looks. My parents and Jenny appeared content after eating as much as they wanted and engaging in one-sided conversation about Jenny. However, they soon departed, looking a little unhappy. Not even "congratulations on your marriage" was said. I was frustrated with Jenny and my parents, but I was also a little lonely. Sam then hurried around to my side and wrapped a kind arm over my shoulders. Although I knew a little bit about your parents, I didn't anticipate it being this horrible. Katie, I know you've had a difficult time throughout the years. Katie, it must have been really hard for you all this time, my mother-in-law went on. Having you as our daughter-in-law makes us very pleased. Please consider us to be your true parents going forward, and don't be afraid to come to us for anything. Paul and Laura, I'm so grateful. Sam and his parents' good comments relieved me, so I thanked them. I then inquired about the wedding with my in-laws. I'd like to keep it small, considering my parents and Jenny. I'm also nervous about inviting friends, so is it okay if we simply have family attend the ceremony? Sam had previously agreed when I informed him about this. Naturally, that's all right. I was glad to have my in-laws support my concept as well. We made our wedding arrangements in this manner. One day, with the wedding coming up soon, I received some startling news. Jenny is tying the knot. Come home soon. Her fiancé is arriving today. This was spoken abruptly by my father, who doesn't often call, so I rushed over to my parents' house. My parents, Jenny, and her fiancé were present when I got there. The fiancé's visage gave me the impression that I had seen him someplace before. Hello, Katie. Wow, I'm so surprised that you're Jenny's older sister. I never would have guessed. Tommy, you're my sister's fiancé. I'm surprised too. Jenny's fiancé's name is Tommy Smith. He's an employee at one of my company's business partners. When I heard your name from Jenny, I thought it might be someone with the same name. I never imagined you were actually sisters. After all, you and Jenny don't look alike at all. He looked me up and down and laughed mockingly. He's like this at work too, always looking down on me. It seems he looks down on me because I'm a high school graduate and didn't go to university. You don't need university. Start working right after high school. Because my parents said things like this to me, I started working at my current company right after graduating from high school. Tommy apparently graduated from a famous university and is the type of man who judges people solely based on their academic background. A man like him is going to become family. I couldn't accept the reality that Tommy was Jenny's fiancé. The atmosphere was terrible, so I wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Congratulations on your engagement. I'll be leaving now. I said just this one thing and tried to leave. But then Jenny said something unbelievable. We've decided to have our wedding on the same day as yours, June 18th, starting at 1:00 p.m., Tommy continued. Unlike your wedding, ours will be a grand affair. The two of them looked at each other and smirked. I was shocked by their statements, and my mind went blank. I had reserved the largest venue in the area. It's a big venue where multiple couples can have their ceremonies in a day. Although I had initially thought about a smaller venue for our small ceremony, my in-laws recommended this place, saying it would be perfect for our special day. If Jenny wants to have a grand wedding, I can understand why this venue might be a candidate. Well, it's understandable that the date might overlap since it's a popular day for weddings. Deliberately matching the time seems like nothing but harassment. Sis, you've gone all stiff. Are you even listening? Katie, are you okay? Faced with the two of them asking in a pretentious manner, I tried to stay as calm as possible. I took a deep breath and asked, what are you thinking? Having your wedding on the same day, and at the same time as mine. Besides, how are Mom, Dad, and the relatives going to attend both weddings? Mom, Dad, and all the relatives will attend our wedding, Jenny answered confidently. To be honest, I had expected this. Even without being told, my parents have always been on Jenny's side. Right there and then, they started calling all the relatives, asking them to attend Jenny's wedding. I've met our relatives several times over the years, but our parents have always lied to them, portraying me as the sister with a bad personality and Jenny as the sweet and cute one. So all the relatives are on Jenny's side this time too. When they learned that Jenny and I had our weddings on the same day and time, they thought that I, the sister with the bad personality, was harassing Jenny. Katie, you're being so immature. I'll be attending Jenny's wedding. The relatives said this one after another. As a result, my parents and all the relatives decided to attend Jenny's wedding. Well, it was within my expectations, but the shock was so great that I was left speechless. Seeing me like this, my parents and Jenny had triumphant expressions on their faces. Sigh, I understand. I'm going home now. I gave up on arguing back and let out a sigh. Even though I said I was leaving, no one came to see me off. With the sound of my parents and Jenny's laughter behind the door, I left my parents' house. After returning home, I apologized to Sam and his parents. I'm sorry. Even though I wanted a wedding with just family, my parents and relatives won't be able to come. However, the three of them comforted me, saying they didn't mind at all. Since we'll have fewer guests, we can make the food more luxurious. Sam said this, trying to cheer me up. I felt relieved by the kindness of Sam and his parents. Then on the day of the wedding, relatives who were attending Jenny's wedding had gathered at the venue. Oh, isn't that Katie? How inconsiderate to have a wedding on the same day as Jenny. And as always, she looks so plain compared to Jenny. Every time we passed each other in the lobby, they would whisper bad things about me. Today, I'm going to have a wonderful ceremony with Sam. I decided to focus on my wedding and put aside these negative thoughts. During the reception after the wedding ceremony, my husband's talented relatives performed one entertainment act after another. Because of this, the venue was filled with excitement and a happy atmosphere. That's when it happened. What's going on here? My sister shouted angrily as she barged into our venue with her husband and his parents. Jenny, what's wrong? I asked my sister after having the reception temporarily paused. All of Tommy's work colleagues suddenly said they couldn't come on the day of the wedding. You must have done something, sis, my sister, clearly irritated, accused me. Apparently, all of my sister's husband's work colleagues had canceled on the day of the wedding, leaving their venue with many empty seats. This is terrible. It's just embarrassing. Now, upon learning that the invited guests had canceled at the last minute, my parents became furious at my sister's husband and his parents. This had apparently created a tense atmosphere at their ceremony. My panicked sister, convinced that I must have done something, explained this to her in-laws, which is why her husband Tommy and his parents had come barging into our venue. Our wedding is a disaster. So why are you having such a fun reception? I can't stand it. Jenny, please calm down. I tried to calm Jenny down, but she continued with even more outrageous claims. Everyone from Sam's family. My sister Katie is the worst person. She's been harassing me since I was little. Jenny, stop it, please. I tried to stop Jenny from ruining the reception, but her momentum didn't stop. More importantly, look at Katie's plain face. Don't you think the wedding dress doesn't suit her at all? Unlike me. She started saying such things in front of Sam's relatives. Katie has always been jealous of my cuteness and has been harassing me. Can you believe this woman is becoming part of your family? Don't you all find it unacceptable? She even went as far as to tell such blatant lies. Tommy chimed in, matching her tone. That's right. Actually, I sometimes work with Katie, and she's an incompetent woman who can't do her job. This is why high school graduates are useless. He started criticizing me, getting carried away. I'm sorry for the late introduction. I'm Katie's sister's husband. Unlike Katie, I graduated from a prestigious university. The company president likes me, so I'm sure to get promoted in the future. Now he started boasting about how capable he was. However, when he looked at my father-in-law Paul sitting among Sam's relatives, his face suddenly turned pale. His demeanor changed completely from the self-satisfied way he had been speaking just moments ago, and he started trembling in fear. Why is the president here? Tommy asked with a trembling voice. Because I'm the father of the groom. In other words, I'm Katie's father-in-law, Paul said. Tommy had his eyes and mouth wide open in surprise. Yes, my father-in-law is the president of Jenny's husband's company. The reception venue for your ceremony was next to ours. Before the ceremony started, I met some of your attendees in the lobby and heard that you and your wife were trying to ruin my son's wedding. Tommy was frozen, realizing that the president had found out about his misdeeds. Is it true that you deliberately matched the wedding date this time? Paul asked with a terrifyingly pleasant smile, looking completely at ease. Apparently, when the people from Tommy's workplace found out that the president was at the wedding next door, they fled before the reception started, thinking they would get in trouble if the president found out. No, that's not true, Mr. President. I didn't know anything about this. It was all my wife Jenny's plan. Tommy hastily started making excuses. Jenny had an expression of disbelief at her husband's sudden change of attitude. I would never try to ruin their wedding. Katie is an important client's employee. What I said earlier was all a joke. Tommy tried to take back his previous statements. Don't lie. However, it didn't work on Paul. He shouted angrily at Tommy. I heard from the employees earlier that you often make statements looking down on Katie. That's not true. Tommy tried to argue back, but perhaps realizing he couldn't lie anymore, he fell silent. Listen here. Katie is a wonderful woman. She couldn't go to university due to family circumstances, but that doesn't matter. She's been working diligently ever since graduating from high school. Paul spoke to Tommy. Despite Shirley having gone through tough times since childhood, she didn't let that environment defeat her and grew up to be an upright, wonderful adult. Unlike you, who judges people based on academic background. She's a lovely woman who can empathize with others. I was so happy that Paul evaluated me in this way that I couldn't help but tear up. Mr. President, I'm terribly sorry for what happened. Tommy quickly apologized, trying to get the president to forgive him. You're apologizing to the wrong person. The one you should be apologizing to isn't me, it's Katie. If you ever tried to interfere with my son and Katie's life again, I absolutely won't forgive you. Next time. Yes, sir, Tommy responded with a trembling voice. Then he looked at me and apologized. Katie, I'm very sorry. His appearance, cowering in fear of the president, started to look pitiful to me. I understand now. I accept your apology. Just please leave this venue. What's going on? Why are we the bad guys? Jenny, seemingly unsatisfied, was still grumbling complaints. Shut up. I wish I hadn't married you. What? I wish I hadn't married a man like you either. In the end, Jenny started screaming, and they were escorted out of the venue by the staff. Watching this whole exchange, my parents looked dumbfounded. They probably never imagined that the president of Tommy's company would be my father-in-law. Realizing they were the unwelcome ones, my parents and Jenny's in-laws hurriedly left the venue together. Although the atmosphere had been disrupted by Jenny and the others suddenly barging in, we quickly resumed our enjoyable reception. The reception continued to be lively after the race start, and our wedding ceremony and reception ended successfully. Paul, thank you so much for today. Your words really meant a lot to me. I expressed my gratitude to Paul. No, I'm sorry my staff caused such trouble. Katie, you're a daughter-in-law we're proud of. Thank you for marrying our son. If you ever have any troubles in the future, don't hesitate to consult with us. Paul spoke to me with kind words. After the wedding, Tommy was apparently afraid he might face some punishment for this incident. However, since it wasn't a work-related issue, he wasn't fired or dismissed. Tommy had been trying to flatter the president in hopes of getting promoted. But after his behavior of openly insulting me was seen at the reception, he could no longer approach the president as he used to. He had thought he was sure to get promoted because the president liked him, but that's now a thing of the past. He had also been telling his colleagues that he was the president's favorite. Now he's being viewed coldly by those around him and has become isolated in the company. Tommy had thought he was close to the president, but he wasn't even informed about who his son was marrying, let alone invited to the wedding. In reality, he wasn't the president's favorite at all, just one of many employees. Feeling uncomfortable at work and seeing his path to promotion closed off, Tommy blamed this whole series of events on Jenny. It's all your fault. He started making such statements and even became violent towards Jenny. They both blame each other, so their relationship has deteriorated. Furthermore, it escalated into a family-involved argument, with my parents suing Tommy and his parents suing Jenny. After their lavish wedding, Jenny and Tommy quickly divorced, and now they're both desperately trying to file lawsuits, each hiring lawyers with expenses piling up. From the wedding to the lawsuits, I heard that Jenny, Tommy, and both sets of parents are now living difficult lives. However, neither side is willing to back down, and they're both being stubborn, so their conflict is likely to be prolonged. After the divorce, Jenny returned to our parents' house, but our parents, who used to spoil her, now treat her harshly, as if their previous indulgence was a lie. Jenny, you're a disgrace to our family. Although she returned home hoping to rely on our parents, it seems she's now being pushed away by them. Now she's desperately trying to get help from me, insisting on how difficult and pitiful her situation is. It's all your fault that I'm in this situation, sis. Sometimes she calls with an angry, strong tone, and other times she calls with a sweet tone asking for help. Sis, please help your poor little sister. With hundreds of emails and missed calls every day, I've gotten fed up with it and recently decided to block Jenny's number. It's not just Jenny, even our parents, who have always belittled and treated me coldly, have started relying on me. It seems our parents invested a lot of money in Jenny's wedding to show off. They also bombard me with calls and emails with the same message. We need your help. We're having financial difficulties. Naturally, I do not intend to reply to them. I was so frightened that they would visit my house one day that I had been ignoring their emails and calls for so long. However, it appears that even the cost of their flight to be here is a hardship for them. They haven't physically appeared yet. For some reason, even Tommy's parents have been getting in touch with me. We would like to speak with your father-in-law directly. This is what their messaging is about. They keep getting in touch with me, even though we are strangers, and on a few occasions, they have even waited to surprise me in front of my house or place of employment. I informed the police about this right away. They've been showing up less regularly in front of me lately due to increasing patrols. I, for one, am content with my joyful life as a newlywed, surrounded by my loving in-laws and my adored husband, Sam. There is no monster-in-law situation to rumor. Instead, my in-laws have greeted me with the warmth of a true daughter. Sam's favorite flavors have been revealed to me recently by my mother-in-law, a food enthusiast. We all four like the meals that my mother-in-law and I make when we get together on the weekends. So this is how good lunches with the family can be. At last, Katie is happy to have the harmony in her family that she had dreamed of since she was a young child. You'd want to break off contact with a family right away if you had parents who treat their kids differently. A sister whose personality was distorted by this treatment, or a brother-in-law who discriminates based on academic background. Hey, I was thinking about how unfortunate and depressed my sister is. I have the ideal strategy. What sort of arrangement? Just keep an eye out. Mary changed into an elegant bridal gown, the type you would wear to a nuptial. She approached the microphone. Would anyone like to take my sister off our hands? She boldly asked the visitors as she turned to face them after receiving it. She is becoming older and not very informed, isn't she? Mary did not understand how impolite her acts were until after she said this, and she glanced at her sister with a smug, cruel smirk. The place suddenly took on a different vibe. Whispers began, and a few visitors sent chilly stares toward Mary. Mary snatched up the microphone once more without realizing. Sister, you really need to market yourself more. Come on, this place is full with attractive physicians. Do you really not realize what you've done? Something significant and unexpected happened in the following instant. I'm a straightforward 31-year-old working lady named Amy Schumer. I don't have any distinguishing characteristics, save from one peculiarity. I went toward a legal profession after middle school and eventually became an attorney. Mary, my sister, is 3 years younger than I am. Because of her charm and sociability, our family has always given her particular treatment. I have a simple, unremarkable look and mediocre style. Since I'm not very charming, my family and relatives have never really valued me. I was coldly treated at home and received very little affection. Mary had an innate charisma that made me feel inadequate, and our parents loved her unconditionally. I got nothing but angry glances. I put my everything into my work. I made a lot of effort in my studies to gain excellent marks and to win my family's approval, but I was never able to match Mary's brilliance. I eventually gave up on attempting to gain their affection and chose to direct my attention elsewhere. I stopped trying to be adored and focused all of my energy on my studies. I made a self-promise to use my expertise to determine my value. I felt more confident when I studied hard and got decent marks. I hoped that one day my parents would compliment me on my academic achievements. Seizing this slender hope, I studied late into the night every night. Even though I consistently performed higher on tests than other kids, and was at the top of my class throughout middle school, my parents never gave me any recognition. Rather, they were critical of my grades a lot. Being the best isn't enough. You also need to receive almost flawless grades in each subject. Yes, science isn't flawless, even if you get a 98%. However, this last exam was really challenging. I would try to provide justifications. My mother would respond sternly, "Again, you end up with such results because you don't put in enough effort." She spoke in an icy tone. "Are you planning to show off those subpar grades?" I was limited to apologizing. "Yes, I apologize," I whispered. My performance was never up to my parents' standards of perfection, no matter how much time and effort I put into it. They never gave me credit for my work. If I received a score lower than 101%, they would just reprimand me. However, my sister Mary's ostensibly harmless remarks caused me more pain than the indifference of my parents. "Oh, sister, you aren't receiving lectures from me again." Without permission, she would enter my room and smile at my report card. Decent grades and constant criticism. That is depressing. I'm commended for just barely passing. "Were you here only to say that?" Exasperated, I asked. Pretending to be alarmed, Mary remarked, "I was worried maybe you were down again, but I didn't expect such a cold reception." I tried to remain cool and said, "If you were really worried, you wouldn't speak to me like that." "That's your issue, you see. This is how you're always so aloof. That explains why your parents don't show you affection," Mary replied, her eyes as icy as ice. She gave me a very clearly contemptuous look. Even when she exited the room, her attitude was evident for a little while. From the living room, I could hear her happy laughter with our parents after she left. Tears streamed down my face as the anguish overcame me. I should have been accustomed to this by now. I told myself over and over again that I didn't need my parents' blessing, and that I wouldn't be affected by what Mary had said. Still, my feelings deceived me, and I started crying. The report card was crumpled in my fingers from my firm grasp. I made the decision once more to be independent and leave this oppressive familial setting. I concluded that the secret to that escape was to excel in my coursework and develop my skills. That made me even more determined to dive headfirst into my studies. One day, my father surprised me with an announcement while the open breeze blew through the classroom windows. "You won't attend high school, Amy. You're going to start looking for work right away," he said icily. I was speechless and could not disguise my perplexity. "Why would you say anything of that nature?" I inquired, my face expressionless. "It is not required to invest in you anymore. You should use your own money to pay for high school if you choose to go. Should that prove to be unattainable, your only option would be to surrender. I'm still in middle school, though. I don't have many opportunities for work. How am I meant to do this?" My objection was ignored. "Then you have to concede this. Your mother and I have chosen to allocate our financial resources mostly to Mary. We really cannot afford to spend more money on you," he firmly said. "That's not fair," I screamed internally. But my father's decision was final. His abrupt words seemed to drain all the color from the world around me, painting everything in shades of gray. My mother and sister looked at me with unhidden smiles, enjoying my misery. I understand much more now. There were options like finding schools with tuition waivers or scholarships. However, back then, without knowing how to access that information, I was simply devastated by the closure of my path to further education. Since that day, my passion for learning faded quickly. The praises from my homeroom teacher, who had always admired my grades, felt hollow, and the lack of interest in education at home made my chances of advancing to higher education seem even more hopeless. I started the next stage of my life by working at a local factory right after graduation. Since I wasn't old enough to live on my own, I stayed with my family until I turned 19. I worked as hard as I could, and most of my salary went to the household. I saved the little money I kept for myself for the future. Those tough days felt like crawling through an endless tunnel. On my 19th birthday, I finally left home. I wrote a single letter for my family and walked away from the place that was now just a memory. My family's reaction was as if I had never existed, complete silence without a single phone call or letter. At first, living apart from my family caused me heartache, and the loneliness cast a shadow over my days. However, as time passed, the loneliness eased with the business of work. After moving out and starting an independent life, the stress I had felt at home disappeared, and I began to experience a mental spaciousness I had never felt before. This newfound peace of mind reignited my enthusiasm. I regained my passion for learning and decided to start studying again. I began with the basics, reviewing them diligently. The joy of learning filled my heart once more. Soon I started to study high school textbooks and began reading extensively. During my reading journey, I became fascinated by books on law, which sparked a deep interest in the legal profession. Despite only having a junior high education, I learned about the preliminary examination system, which allowed someone like me to take the bar exam. With this new information, my dedication to studying intensified. I used every possible moment to study, even during short breaks at work. I memorized legal terms during lunch, always preparing for the bar exam. The people at my workplace, mostly older than me, saw my earnest efforts and supported me. At the age of 24, I passed the bar exam. After passing the exam, I left my long-term job at the factory and secured a position at a top law firm. After about 5 years of training, I set out on my own and opened my law practice. Now I happily work as a legal consultant for a hospital. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I told my parents about becoming a lawyer. I think about how they might react and if I could finally meet their expectations. However, I haven't shared anything with them, and deep down, I believe I won't reach out to them. An unexpected reunion with my family came sooner than I thought. One evening, after finishing work, I found a message on my phone from my younger sister, Mary. She was getting married. Mary is getting married, I murmured to myself. My sister, now 29, was engaged to a doctor, and her wedding was next month. They wanted me to attend. Despite the long estrangement from Mary and my parents, I couldn't ignore this significant event, so I replied that I would attend. Mary quickly responded with the exact date and location of the ceremony. The message ended with, "Don't forget the wedding gift," which made me smile. Perhaps Mary was more interested in the gift than in welcoming me. I decided to use the wedding as a chance to reunite with the family and then part ways again. On the day of Mary's wedding, I put on a carefully selected blue dress and headed to the venue after completing the entrance formalities. I took my seat in the family area where my father and mother were already seated. "You have some nerve showing up here. You must be doing well for yourself with the meager earnings from the factory," my father said coldly. "Indeed, you're right. Introducing someone like her as family does not do us any credit as parents," my mother added with disdain. "Mary shouldn't have invited someone like you," my father continued. I told them exactly that, but they insisted on getting the celebration money anyway, my mother said quietly, even though I was right there. They carried on this conversation without any hesitation. This was the reality I faced. I had a faint hope that sharing my side might bridge the gap between us, but it was quickly shattered. Both my father and mother seemed to completely avoid talking to me. In the silence, I glanced around the venue and noticed some familiar faces among the groom's side. Haven't I seen that person somewhere before? I thought to myself, feeling a sense of déjà vu. As I traced my uncertain memory, I looked up the groom's name, and my suspicion turned into conviction. The connection I had anticipated became clear. I couldn't entirely hide my faint surprise. Such a coincidence, almost like a twist of fate, I marveled. However, I decided to keep my emotions in check and spend the day quietly. As the ceremony proceeded, the bride and groom made a glamorous entrance. Guests spoke warm words and gave entertaining performances that softened the atmosphere. As time passed, the banquet gradually shifted to dinner and then to photo sessions. Throughout this time, my parents got up without acknowledging me and moved toward the front where the bride and groom awaited. Mary, as if drawn by a magnet, clung close to the bride and groom, smiling happily in every photograph. Pretending not to be affected by the scene unfolding before me, I focused silently on the meal in front of me. Unexpectedly, my sister Mary approached me. She came closer with a smile, but her eyes had a spark of something more than excitement to see her sister after so many years. "Big sis, it's been such a long time, hasn't it? Are you happy to spend time together like this?" she asked. Slightly, I nodded quietly and said, "Yes." "The banquet food is really wonderful." With a sarcastic smile, Mary continued, "You can't get such luxurious food at the factory you work at, can you? You should be grateful for this opportunity." Something inside me felt like it was being torn apart, but I didn't show it on my face. Mary's words became sharper, tauntingly piercing me. "Oh dear, did I upset you? I'm sorry, but it's natural for you to be envious, isn't it? Your little sister marrying a doctor and all." Mary said, the words "I'm sorry" flippantly, as if they were meaningless. I kept my expression unchanged and quietly waited for my next move. At that moment, Mary whispered in my ear, "Big sis, because I feel sorry for you, I've come up with a great idea." Despite trying to stay calm, I asked with suspicion, "A great idea? What is it?" Mary, looking satisfied, said, "You'll see. Just watch closely." Wearing her elegant wedding dress, Mary gathered everyone's attention. She took a microphone from the staff and suddenly announced loudly to the guests, "Ladies and gentlemen, you may not be aware, but my sister is here. She may not have the highest education or be the youngest, but if there is anyone kind-hearted enough, could you please take her under your wing?" My face turned red. "What are you saying, Mary?" I exclaimed. Mary continued even louder. "Although she doesn't earn much and leads a modest life, is there someone here who can brighten my sister's future?" As everyone focused on me, Mary seemed to enjoy my discomfort with a smug smile. At that moment, a shocking scene unfolded. Mary's rude behavior escalated, and even our normally gentle parents joined in. "Please treat her kindly," my parents added. This was the last straw for me. Rage swirled within me. To ridicule someone so much at a happy event, how far would they go? I couldn't believe it, but now it was time for them to face reality. As the atmosphere shifted and murmurs spread through the venue, Mary, unaware she was the center of attention, cheerfully called out, "Amy, look. There are so many doctors here. It's your chance." I stayed silent but conveyed my strong will through my sober gaze. "This is the end for you." Confused, Mary responded, "Eh?" I continued more calmly, "You'll understand soon just how terrible your actions have been." Just as Mary tried to make an excuse, the groom suddenly raised his voice. "Wait, please. Why are you leaving your seats?" The venue was riveted by his voice. Looking toward the groom, it was clear all his colleagues from work were standing up, heading for the exit. Even as the groom tried to stop them, a dignified man who appeared to be the hospital director spoke to the groom with determination. The recent remarks of the bride were so unpleasant that I'm in disbelief. "I apologize, but we can no longer stay here. We will take our leave now," the hospital director said. The groom hurried to stop him, offering to take responsibility for Mary's words and actions. "Please wait. I admit her words were inappropriate. I'll speak to her directly and ensure she changes her behavior." However, the hospital director pointed out the gravity of the issue and revealed something the groom didn't know. The problem isn't just that. Do you not know what kind of person her sister is? The groom, confused, admitted, "No, I only met her sister for the first time today. All I've heard is that she worked in a factory after graduating from middle school." The hospital director couldn't hide his irritation. "Don't be ridiculous. Her sister is a respected lawyer and serves as the legal advisor to our hospital." The groom was shocked to learn this, indicating he had no idea I was the hospital's legal advisor. Mary and my parents were also speechless. I was the legal advisor of the hospital where Mary's fiancé worked. I had seen him several times at hospital events, which is why he looked familiar. The other guests probably realized this too. Mary's inappropriate comments only made things worse, and that's why the hospital director was so outraged. Although the groom himself had no direct relation to me, the hospital director and staff valued the legal advisor highly. The groom's face turned red, and he stepped toward Mary, raising his voice. "What on earth is this?" "Because of your carelessness, my reputation is now tarnished." Mary stumbled over her words, then defended herself like a bewildered child. "It's not like that. I truly had no idea my sister was in such a prestigious position." Growing more indignant, the groom continued to scold Mary. "Ignorance is no excuse. How can you speak so lightly and disrespectfully of your own sister? Your behavior is disgraceful. You've truly lost sight of what's valuable." Mary, desperately trying to explain, pleaded, "Wait a minute. Listen. I have a good reason." However, the groom, without giving her a chance to explain, declared decisively, "The marriage is off. I have no interest in hearing your excuses. Our engagement ends here." Shocked by his words, Mary collapsed on the spot, her complexion turning deathly pale. In a fit of anger, the groom stormed out of the wedding hall along with the other guests. As I was about to leave, I heard a desperate cry from my sister behind me. "Please help me, Amy." Without being swayed by her cries, I confronted her with a stern tone. "Assist you? Why ought I to? You are in this circumstance as a result of your own deeds. It's pitiful to make jokes about other people and then act like the victim." Mary begged, bewildered and nervous. "Why are you speaking so harshly? Had I been aware of your legal accomplishments?" I answered, quietly but firmly. "Why should I have to tell someone who has never been in touch with me about my line of work? Actually, after this wedding, I was going to break up with you. But after witnessing your sad demise, I'm kind of relieved. That your engagement to a doctor has been canceled must disappoint you. You'd best put in a lot of effort to locate your next possibility." I exited the place with dignity after saying these things. I could hear my parents and other visitors criticizing remarks from a distance. Everything went according to plan, and Mary's marriage ended. For the first time, Mary faced the wrath of my parents, who had assumed that her marriage to a doctor would guarantee them a stable future. Mary, unable to bear their rage, begged for assistance, but I disregarded her. "Please." Despite my best efforts, I never returned her calls and severed all communication with the family. I'd heard that Mary had abandoned her work and was living alone at home, alienated from our parents, and without a job. Personally, I am content with my job and my personal life, leading a quiet existence free from major issues. Despite the difficult times I've had with my family, I am fortunate to have many individuals in my everyday and professional life that support me. This favorable atmosphere is a result of my years of diligent work and effort rather than happenstance. I have experienced difficult obstacles in the past, but rising beyond them has shaped who I am now. I can now appreciate my previous challenges when I reflect on them. I intend to continue leading a happy life at my own speed, making sensible objectives, and minimizing stress. I recall being happy with my life, making good money, and handling things nicely until one day I was shocked. I received a notification from my credit card company about a $91,000 charge. I was so surprised that I had not seen this transaction. I immediately stopped making the payment. My husband, Jason, who was traveling, phoned me many times around the same time. I took charge of the situation in spite of the mayhem. I'm currently 31 years old and a manager at a firm. I've been married for 2 years to my college love, Jason, who is also 31. Several of our acquaintances decided to quit their careers after getting married, but I stayed in my position. Since his salary is more stable than mine, I occasionally worry about our future because I make more money than he does. Our financial independence is preserved. We split family expenditures evenly and each handle our own finances. We both work, so our life together is going well. Therefore, I typically don't mind that I may spend my spare cash anyway I see fit thanks to this arrangement. But I just realized on a train journey home that I might have overspent a little. I soon forgot about the concept of looking for any unused subscriptions that could still be costing me as I rapidly checked over a debit alert on my phone and fought to recall my credit card gateway password. It's difficult to find the drive to resolve this, and getting to the support center is difficult. On weekdays, they are open from 8:00 a.m. to 6:00 p.m., precisely when most individuals who work can't make calls. Long lines at lunchtime are also a hindrance. However, knowing that the contact center would get in touch with me if there's a serious problem, such as a charge over $40,000, comforts me a little. I'm a little too comfortable reaching out to them directly because I have faith in the system. Online shopping, meanwhile, provides a little reprieve from these and other work-related stressors. I had a fleeting thrill when I opened the parcel that had just arrived. But this emotion vanished as soon as I stepped inside our living room. My mood changed abruptly as I saw the sight inside. A random phone and sweatshirt haphazardly thrown on the couch, empty cans on the table, and socks all over the place. Yes, my spouse was idling around in a sweatshirt without seeming to notice the mess. My spouse tends to leave things unclean, which makes it seem like he's intentionally making things more chaotic at home. Hey, socks and empty cans, that's what I come home to. I exclaimed, half jokingly, half exasperatedly, pointing my phone toward the sofa. If you get home before me, it's not that hard to tidy up a little or even prepare supper. He said coolly, "Why don't you clean the house if you arrive home early?" Remain calm about it. It hurt a little bit. When I get home, I'm tired too. I shot back, trying to be stern but not overly harsh. Maybe you should think about whether you prefer working or doing chores if you're not going to help clean. He said, "Please just drop it," not once but twice, expressing his irritation while not truly understanding what I had said. I gave him a hard look, but he was too preoccupied with his phone to see my annoyance. The fact that I was taking on more labor and tasks felt unfair. Was I being irrational? I wasn't sure, but I thought confronting him would make him even less concerned about maintaining our house. After our conversation, something unexpected happened. Even on the days when I arrived early, my spouse started arriving home later. He appeared to have made the decision to work longer hours. Maybe this was his attempt to correct our imbalance. That day, I was feeling more upbeat, so I put more effort and vitality into my household tasks than usual. My husband Jason has been really busy lately, which meant the housekeeping duties had mostly fallen to me. I hadn't really thought much about it until I found myself cleaning his room, which he hadn't tidied up in quite some time. As I entered his room, it was just as I expected. Empty bottles and cans were strewn everywhere, even on the bed. Amid the clutter, something caught my eye. There was a package elegantly wrapped in gift paper lying unobtrusively. Peering closer, I recognized the branding. It was from my favorite store. A flicker of excitement passed through me as I realized my birthday was just around the corner. Could this be a surprise gift from Jason? Despite my curiosity, I decided to respect the surprise pretending I hadn't seen anything, and leaving the package untouched. However, the gift never appeared. As my birthday arrived and the day progressed, I casually asked Jason, "Do you know what day it is?" "Oh, right, it's your birthday," he replied nonchalantly. "Did you forget?" I pressed, hoping for a hint of the surprise I had seen earlier. "No, I remember," he responded. "Aren't you happy with what I gave you last year? You know you're old enough not to need constant surprises." His words, so casually delivered, stung me. He went back to his room, leaving me puzzled and hurt. That mysterious box had sparked a glimmer of hope, but now it just made me uneasy. Suddenly, he announced a new twist. "I've got to go on a work trip abroad next week." This was unexpected. A business trip to another country. I repeated, incredulous. "Since when does your job involve international travel? You've never even been on a business trip outside the state." "They just gave me this assignment," he simply replied. The whole situation felt increasingly strange. What was really going on? I had been feeling quite accomplished lately, believing I deserved some recognition. "You should trust me," my husband had said. But his words were hard to take seriously after I discovered a mysterious gift-wrapped box in his room. On the day he left for his so-called business trip, after waving him off in the early morning, my curiosity got the better of me. I searched under the bed where I had seen the box, but it was gone. Doubt gnawed at me. This wasn't just a regular business trip, was it? With this uneasy thought, I dragged myself to work, but I was hardly in a state to focus. Several times my hands just stopped moving, my mind replaying the recent events over and over. "Hey, are you okay? You seem out of it today," a coworker inquired. "Oh yeah, I just didn't get enough sleep," I replied, trying to brush it off with a light-hearted excuse. Just then, my phone vibrated sharply. A strange number flashed on the screen. Normally, I would ignore such calls, but something inside me urged me to answer it this time. "Excuse me, I need to take this," I said, stepping outside to talk. It was the credit card company's call center on the line. As I listened, a flurry of thoughts raced through my mind about my husband, our recent issues, the necessity of sharing my password. Then the representative's words cut through my confusion. "This is from our debt protection service. It seems there has been a charge exceeding $40,000 on your account," the voice explained calmly. I was stunned by the information, a mix of disbelief and concern overwhelming me. What on earth was going on? The conversation with the operator intensified when she dropped another bombshell. Yes, there was a charge for $91,000. That's impossible. Wait a second, I gasped, my heart racing. I dashed back to my desk, rifling through my wallet, only to find that my credit card was missing. "That's the card I meant to have with me," the operator clarified. "Pardon me, can you please halt that transaction?" I asked urgently, phone pressed tightly against my ear. "Yes, it's still pending, so we can stop it," she assured me, and a wave of relief washed over me. "And please, can you handle the stolen card issue immediately?" "I don't have it with me," I added. "Yes, ma'am, I'll take care of it right away," she responded. Even though the situation was partially resolved, the adrenaline didn't stop pumping through my veins. I hung up, my heart still pounding. "I'm sorry, I'm not in the right state to work. I need to leave early. It seems my credit card was stolen and almost misused, and I have a lot to sort out," I explained to my boss, who understood and allowed me to leave. I caught the train quickly, and as I checked my phone, I saw countless missed calls from my husband. It felt as though he was trying to confess something. I rushed home, threw off my shoes, dropped my bag, and went straight to my husband's office. His desk was cluttered, but what caught my eye was his search history, luxury cruises, and travel plans for two. These were definitely not work-related. I hadn't been invited to any such event. The so-called business trip was clearly a cover for something else. My heart sank as I realized the implications. Scrolling through my old emails for any clues, I noticed a name that stood out: Billy. What the heck is this? I muttered, my anger rising. I wanted to slam the keyboard in frustration. Instead, I forced myself to look for concrete proof of whatever was going on. My phone kept ringing incessantly as I pieced everything together. Oh my God, just stop, I groaned, overwhelmed by the betrayal and chaos unfolding before me. In the turmoil, I decided to use the password given by the call center to check my credit card transaction history. I logged into my account and began scrolling through the records, my disbelief growing with each entry. There it was, a transaction for an expensive handbag brand that caught my eye. The pieces suddenly clicked. Jason had used my credit card to indulge his mistress, Olivia, and even funded a supposed business trip abroad. The realization left me stunned. I had ignored several calls, but now, gathering all my courage, I answered the phone. You finally picked up after I tried so many times, my husband said, his voice anxious. He immediately started talking about the credit card. Whose card is it for? I asked pointedly. He hesitated before replying, you mean whose card? Well, it's easier to use a card than cash abroad, especially on work trips. Work trips? Or do you mean the luxury cruise and the getaway with Olivia? I countered sharply. He tried to deflect. Why are you asking about the cruise? That was for business entertainment, a fun time. Olivia and the designer bag. Was Olivia happy with it? Are you seriously trying to justify this by pretending you don't know what's going on? I pushed further, my voice steady but filled with pain. My husband faltered, the reality of the confrontation setting in. I understand, he repeated, his voice tinged with desperation as he attempted to grasp at excuses. I know everything, I stated clearly. You tried to spend $91,000 on a luxury cruise and a vacation package for couples. You've been using my credit card to lavish Olivia with gifts. After a pause, he finally admitted, I'm sorry I cheated. I'm sorry, but I can't come home until you reactivate the credit card. His plea hung in the air, absurd and almost pitiful. Do you really think an apology and admission are enough to make all of this go away? I asked, the weight of his betrayal pressing down on me. The conversation had shifted irrevocably from mundane marital grievances to a stark, painful reckoning. Feeling utterly betrayed, I told my husband, please spend the rest of your life at your resort, and then hung up the phone before he could respond. Almost immediately, my phone started buzzing nonstop. The incessant ringing drove me to the edge, prompting me to turn off the device to escape the noise. Soon after, an email notification popped up, informing me that my husband's return flight was scheduled for noon, 5 days later. I seized this window of opportunity to set my affairs in order, deciding to resolve everything before he could set foot back home. The next day, as part of my plan, I began clearing out all his belongings from our house. On the second day, I gathered the courage to tell my in-laws about everything that had happened, showing them the proof of his infidelity and misuse of our finances. They were shocked and deeply apologetic. By the end of our conversation, they agreed to support me in getting a divorce, promised to ensure I would receive $2 million in alimony, and vowed to recover the funds my husband had frivolously spent. As the day of my husband's return approached, I received a call in the early evening from my in-laws, confirming that they had safely filed the divorce papers. Surprisingly, my soon-to-be ex-husband had only taken a credit card with him, leaving the rest of our finances untouched. The woman he was with, however, had given him $91,000. Enraged by the unfolding events, she changed her flight, departing for Singapore before him without his knowledge. I wondered why she hadn't just taken his plane ticket and visa and left him stranded. While pondering this, I learned from my in-laws that when my ex-husband returned to Singapore, he found the house empty and his connection to me severed, his calls going straight to voicemail. In a desperate attempt to find refuge, he went to my in-laws' house, where he faced significant repercussions for his actions. After everything that had unfolded, the final step was filing the divorce papers. My ex-husband had gotten himself into deeper trouble, and it didn't stop with our separation. The woman he had been seeing was now demanding that he return the $91,000 she had given him. I heard from my in-laws that after he repaid the money, they imposed strict conditions on him, almost as if he were back in high school. He was essentially under house arrest with a 15-hour curfew, and his every move was being monitored by his own family, ensuring he paid off all the money he owed. In the midst of all this, I took legal action myself, filing a $115,000 claim against the other woman involved in the affair. With help from my in-laws, I gathered the necessary information to go after her financially. And once I did, it felt like the last piece of this painful puzzle was finally falling into place. It was a long and exhausting process, but when the claim went through, I felt a sense of closure. The legal side of things had been resolved, and it was time for me to focus on moving forward. When I returned to work the next day, my colleagues and bosses welcomed me back with surprising warmth and concern. Many of them had heard about my situation, and their kindness was palpable. "Hey, are you okay? If you want to talk about anything, I'm here," one of my colleagues offered gently. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone. I replied with a grateful smile, "Thank you. I'm doing all right, just trying to get back into the swing of things. Maybe we can grab a drink after work. I'd appreciate the company." It felt good to make plans and to look forward to simple pleasures like a night out with friends. We were all there at a neighborhood tavern that evening, and the companionship was comforting. The immediate comfort of friendly faces trumped the shadow of recent events as we laughed and told tales together. The harshness of the last several months appeared to mellow a little with each drink of my beer. I spoke out to my coworkers about the experience, and they listened sympathetically. As the evening drew to a close, I merely wanted to put this behind me, I admitted. I think I'm ready to move forward, to focus on the positives that the future holds. They nodded in agreement, a mute testament to my fortitude. To fresh starts, they repeated. That evening, when I exited the pub, feelings of optimism and closure blended together. My morale had been raised by my coworkers' encouragement, and I was grateful for their influence on my life. It served as a reminder that goodness can still shine through, even in the wake of heartbreak and betrayal. I experienced a cautious optimism as I looked ahead. While it was true that nothing could undo the past, I still had control over the future. I was gradually reestablishing my feeling of normalcy once the legal issues had been resolved, and I had clearly delineated my limits. The road ahead would not be without difficulties, but with the encouragement of friends and a revitalized sense of self, I felt ready to confront them. Yes, it appeared like better times were coming. I officially transferred ownership of our house to my parents. While he and I were talking about a divorce, Charles violently pointed at me and ordered that I leave the house. Charles had an indifferent, distant demeanor. As he unleashed a barrage of insults, his parents looked on in blissful quiet, supporting his actions. I ignored the awful things they said. I had anticipated this moment, having mentally and emotionally readied myself for it. I calmly packed up my things and walked out of the house. They had no idea how bad the situation they had put themselves in was, or how soon the storm would arrive. My name is Mary, and I recently turned 55. After a lengthy marriage, Charles and I now have grown children who live happy, independent lives separate from us. I was a conventional salaried employee before a buddy introduced me to the world of teaching people how to make handcrafted products. It began as a hobby, but has now become a fulfilling career. This new stage of my life has given me such contentment and happiness. I find fulfillment in my everyday interactions with my students, and the simple act of creating has come to be a source of comfort and peace for me. Some people may take offense at my turning a passion into a career, but I genuinely don't mind. I had a chance to meet Charles at the company where I used to work. Our bond blossomed over social and professional events while he worked for a client business. We finally decided to tie the knot after falling in love. We were lucky to have a healthy, lovely child after 5 years of marriage. He grew into a bright young man, graduated from a prestigious university, got married, and is now living a successful, happy life. Despite our son's achievements, Charles and I had a worsening relationship over time. When he finally transformed, I hardly recognized the kind and gentle guy I had married. Charles lost his temper and began acting more like a servant than a partner. His constantly shifting tastes and demands were too much for me to bear, and nothing I tried would seem to please him. These days, he gets angry easily and accuses me of the littlest things. I feel emotionally depleted and exhausted since there has been a rise in verbal abuse. I did everything I could to keep our family together and keep the peace, but it was clear that Charles had become someone I could no longer live with. The love and respect that had once defined our marriage had been replaced by resentment and anger. As I walked out of the home, I felt that this was the right thing to do for both my future and myself. It was time to reclaim my identity, my happiness, and my calm. I had to acknowledge the reality of our situation, despite the fact that our marriage was filled with hope and love at first, and lasted for a very long period. Charles had several chances to demonstrate to me how much he was hurting me and to turn around, but I had lost hope in him. Knowing that I made the right choice for me as I begin this new chapter of my life, I feel relieved. Even though breaking up with someone is never easy, there are times when letting go is necessary to reach your own goals. My desire to start again and move on from this life has been growing, but I'm being held back by an unpaid mortgage. Charles made matters worse by unexpectedly quitting his job without giving a reason and spending all of his time at home. He seldom ever offers assistance. Therefore, I have to handle all the responsibilities and work by myself. The recent renovation of the house where we presently live was overseen by me. I gradually became frugal with my money, putting away cash for its restoration. This house represents my aspirations, my labors, and all I have ever wanted. It is so much more than just a place for me to live. I have given this house all I have, and I cannot face the thought of it falling into Charles's hands if I were to leave. Beyond the financing issue, this house stands for my objectives. When I was planning it, I was very particular about every little thing, and made sure to include all the things I've always wanted, including a big kitchen. Charles first assisted a bit, but since I was the one who paid for everything, I felt that my choices would be respected. Despite the obstacles we faced along the way, the home ultimately took shape and had every feature I had envisaged. I was thrilled to see the results of all my hard work when we moved in, since it was so fulfilling to see something tangible. However, the true cost of construction ended up being far more than we had projected. We were only able to pay off a much larger debt than we had anticipated. Taking on such a big debt in our 50s was not an easy decision, but I believed the pleasure our new home provided would make it worthwhile. For me, the house was a dream realized, but Charles wasn't as thrilled. He sulked, his complaints lingering because his opinions weren't as reflected in the final design as he'd hoped. He even went so far as to say the house was a waste of money, comparing it to throwing cash down the drain. Ignoring his grumbling, I pressed forward, knowing the house was everything I had hoped for. But his attitude worsened. Gradually, Charles stopped talking to me, resorting to childish behavior like leaving trash scattered around and disorganizing the house on purpose. Small, spiteful acts aimed at irritating me. Each day, I wondered when this tension would end, when I could finally break free from this toxic cycle. These thoughts weighed on my mind constantly as I tried to navigate the delicate balance between my love for the home I'd built and a strained marriage that now threatened to suffocate me. A few months after we moved into the new house, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang one afternoon. We weren't expecting any visitors, so I was curious about who it could be. As I prepared to head to the door, Charles surprisingly got up before I could. It struck me as odd since he rarely made any effort to be involved in anything these days. It seemed like he knew who the visitor was. After a short while, cheerful voices and laughter came from the entrance, a stark contrast to the usual tension in our home. When the door to the living room slowly opened, it revealed the visitors. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the faces of my unexpected in-laws, Kevin and Carolyn. Seeing them was always a source of tension for me. From the moment Charles and I announced our marriage, they treated me coldly, criticizing me for my lower social status and showing an awkward attitude. Even on our wedding day, their interference didn't stop after the wedding either, and each encounter with them left me feeling uneasy, always wondering how to handle the situation. Over time, as our contact with them decreased, I thought things might have settled down. That's why their sudden visit caught me off guard. I greeted them politely, trying to mask the slight tension I felt, but they walked right past me without so much as a word, one of them even bumping into my shoulder as if I weren't there. They immediately began marveling at the house, particularly the spacious, user-friendly kitchen that I had designed with so much care. Charles, now eager and proud, gave them a full tour of the house, showing off all the details. When they returned to the living room, their expressions seemed satisfied, as though they were impressed. But then Charles's face hardened, and suddenly he raised his voice at me, demanding that I hurry and prepare tea and snacks for his parents. His tone caught me off guard, and I rushed to get everything ready as quickly as I could. Despite my best efforts, Kevin and Carolyn seemed dissatisfied, making subtle remarks about the hospitality. Kevin, in particular, barely finished his tea before expressing his dissatisfaction, though he did take a moment to compliment the interior of the house. Then, with a broad smile on his face, Charles invited his parents to live with us in the house. He spoke as if I wasn't even there, as if my thoughts and feelings didn't matter. His parents seemed to take his words seriously and left soon after, satisfied with the idea. As I watched them leave, I couldn't help but feel the enormous gap between Charles and me widening further. He was laughing and chatting with his parents, something I hadn't seen him do in a long time, and it reminded me of how distant he had become. After that day, Charles's parents began visiting more frequently. At first, it was just a few times a month, but soon their visits increased to several times a week. Before I knew it, they were coming over nearly every day, and with each visit, their criticisms of me intensified. No matter what I did, it was never good enough for them, and Charles never stood up for me. In fact, he started blaming me more. He constantly complained that I didn't listen, and he even accused me of causing stress for our son, which felt like a baseless attack. Despite how frustrated and hurt I was, I couldn't seem to find the courage to speak up. Every time I wanted to defend myself, the words got stuck in my throat, and all I could do was offer apologies. The in-laws' visits didn't just increase. They started coming over even when I wasn't home, often arriving with Charles. I would return to find empty beer cans and bottles scattered around the house and spilled alcohol soaking into the new rug I had bought with such care. The house, which I had worked so hard to make perfect, began to smell of alcohol and feel dirty. I protested, of course. I asked Charles to intervene, but he ignored me, brushing off my concerns. It was as if my feelings didn't matter anymore. The house I had dreamed of, the house that was supposed to be our sanctuary, was slowly becoming a place where I felt trapped and powerless. The more his parents came, the more I felt like a stranger in my own home, and the more distant Charles became from me. I couldn't understand why Charles, who contributed nothing to the household, was always the first to complain. His growing involvement in gambling added another layer of stress to my life. Almost daily, I would find discarded betting slips, constant reminders of his risky habit. No matter how many times I tried to explain the dangers of gambling and the impact it was having on our finances, my words fell on deaf ears. The losses were devastating, especially since the money he was gambling away was the result of my hard work and long hours. Nearly a month into the in-laws' frequent visits, they had become bolder, often coming over when I wasn't home. One day, I returned earlier than expected and found them lounging in my house as if it were their own. I confronted them, but their snarky remarks and dismissive attitude made it clear they considered my presence an inconvenience. Frustrated and stressed by the sheer audacity of Charles and his parents, I realized I had reached my breaking point. Instead of letting my emotions take over, I knew I had to come up with a plan to address the situation. During this chaotic time, something strange happened. The in-laws visited one day when I was supposed to be away. Their odd timing caught me off guard, and I sarcastically commented on how they always seemed to avoid me. Ignoring my remarks, they brazenly entered the house. Charles greeted them with a welcoming smile and led them on a tour, showing off different areas of the house, from the kitchen to the bathroom. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a hidden agenda behind their visit. They inspected everything carefully, as if they were evaluating the place. When they left, they had satisfied expressions on their faces, as though they had confirmed something I wasn't aware of. Feeling uneasy, I questioned Charles about the inspection. He brushed off my concerns, telling me not to worry and insisting that it was none of my business. But his behavior made me suspect that he was hiding something from me. It felt like he was manipulating the situation, though I couldn't quite figure out what his endgame was. All I could do was observe and wait, hoping to uncover the truth. Then one day after a long day at work, I came home to find a large moving truck parked in front of our house. The truck had the logo of a moving company called Moving Center. I was stunned. As I approached, I saw Charles talking with the truck driver and some company representatives. When he noticed me, he quickly looked away and disappeared into the house, avoiding any eye contact. My heart sank. But the biggest shock came when my in-laws arrived at the same moment. They greeted me casually, as if nothing unusual was happening, and Charles welcomed them inside with open arms. The atmosphere felt tense, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As I followed them into the house, my suspicions were confirmed. The furniture and belongings I had known for years were gone. In their place was my in-laws' old, dated furniture, arranged as though they were preparing to move in permanently. It was as if my home, the house I had worked so hard for, was being turned into theirs without my consent. I stood there in disbelief, trying to process what I was seeing. My world felt like it was spinning out of control, and it became clear that Charles had been planning this behind my back for some time. His parents seemed smug, as if they had finally taken over, while I was left standing in the middle of what used to be my home, feeling like an outsider. I sat down on the sofa, surrounded by Charles and his parents, all wearing smug smiles that made it clear they had something planned. Their behavior radiated confidence, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Despite feeling anxious, I decided to remain quiet and see how things would unfold. My in-laws exchanged hurried glances and finally declared that they had something important to tell me, hinting at an ulterior motive. Bracing myself, I tried to stay calm. Charles let out a deep sigh before revealing what I had already suspected. He had sold the house to his parents. He then bluntly proposed a divorce, and his parents, nodding in agreement, looked pleased with themselves, their smirking faces showing that they had been plotting this all along. Despite the shocking revelation, I stayed composed. I had seen this coming and prepared myself for this moment. Without hesitation, I signed the divorce papers, took off my wedding ring, placed it on the table, and calmly declared that I would be leaving the house for a while. I had been suspicious of Charles and his parents, especially with their increasing visits when I wasn't around to confirm my doubts. I had installed hidden surveillance cameras around the house connected to my phone. I monitored their conversations daily, and one day I stumbled upon footage of Charles and his parents joyfully discussing their plan to sell the house. Shocked but determined, I knew I had to act quickly. In the days that followed, I quietly made plans for my next move. Using the information I gathered from the surveillance footage, I decided to transfer the home loan, which was still under my name, to Charles. If they wanted to kick me out of the house I had worked so hard for, they could take on the mortgage as well. After all, the $5,500 monthly payments had always come from my hard-earned salary. I doubted that Charles and his parents, now unemployed, would be able to manage the payments without my help. I resolved not to provide any further financial support. Once everything was in place, I moved into my new home, a well-arranged, cozy space furnished with new items I had carefully chosen for this fresh start. I was finally free from the burdens of my old life, ready to begin a new chapter. On my first day off in my new place, I relished the idea of having some much-needed rest. I slept in late, enjoying the quiet peace of my new surroundings. But just as I was about to doze off again, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. To my surprise, Charles and his parents stood at my doorstep, uninvited. Without waiting for an answer, they barged into my home, clearly upset. They spread out a document in front of me and accused me of changing the name on the house loan without their permission. Apparently, they had received the paperwork shortly after I left, and it came as a shock to them. Their expressions of disbelief told me they hadn't anticipated this. Charles and his parents angrily explained that they were all unemployed and couldn't afford the high monthly payments. Charles, in a furious outburst, declared that they would not pay the loan, as if refusing to face the reality of the situation. Calmly, I tried to explain the consequences of defaulting on the mortgage. I told them how interest and late fees would add up, increasing the final amount they would owe. Charles seemed skeptical at first, but as he searched for information online, his expression quickly changed. The weight of what I had done finally sank in. Shock and distress crossed his face as he realized the financial burden that now rested solely on his shoulders. I suggested that they look for new jobs to make a fresh start. Their features got paler even as the situation's truth set in. They acknowledged that they had no assets or money to fall back on, and that Charles was struggling with large gambling debts and had no steady source of income. They begged me for sympathy and assistance, desperate, and they reminded me of the years we had spent together. I was unfazed by their entreaties, though. I was determined not to fall into the same trap of aiding them again after everything they had put me through. They tried to guilt-trip me into changing my mind because they were frustrated by my rejection, but I swiftly put an end to their attempts to make things right. As their desperation increased, they made a desperate attempt to denounce me to the authorities, accusing me of having changed the mortgage without their permission. The authorities quickly got involved, and Charles and his parents were finally taken off my land. They had to relocate to a smaller, more economical flat on the outskirts of town due to serious financial issues. While it was far from the comfortable life they had known, Charles was able to assist his parents by working a part-time job. My life, however, continued to be stable, and I was able to concentrate on my work without having to worry about the turmoil they had caused. I always had an interest for homemade crafts, so in my spare time I began a blog about them. I was surprised to learn that the site was getting traffic and that I was soon making twice as much money as I was previously. I was inundated with requests to do seminars and courses, and I discovered that I was busy than ever, but in a way that made me happy and fulfilled. I wouldn't be getting married again. I realized that after all I had gone through, I was happy to get by on my own in life. I once stumbled upon an old home account book from the beginning of my marriage when sorting through some old stuff. I was reminded as I turned through its pages of the financial difficulties Charles and I had experienced together and how hard we had had to work at that time to make ends meet. But I felt a sense of resolution instead of sadness. Those early days had been a long time ago, and now I was creating a new bliss for myself the way I wanted it. Knowing that I had permanently closed that chapter of my life, I put the account book back on the shelf and prepared myself to face the future with assurance.